My guest today had a rough start in life, but the truth is where you start doesn't dictate where you end up. She is living proof of that. Allison Grier, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Tell me about your upbringing. Those were not easy years, were they?
No, I grew up with a single mom, and I lived with my grandmother up to the age of 10. She passed away, and when I was 10. My father wasn't, I only met my father in my late 30s, 33. I went to visit him in Jamaica, and it was rough. I went through a lot, looked for love in the wrong places, and I was broken.
You experienced some abuse in those years as well, didn't you?
Yes, I was molested when I was younger, just feeling abandoned. I felt abandoned, especially when my grandmother passed away, and she took her own life, and I just felt that she was the only one that I had, and she left.
Why didn't she stay and fight for you?
Yes. And my mom, she was young, she was young, and she, single mom, and I'm an only child. And her friend, she was young, she enjoyed her life, and I just felt I was just alone.
And I know what happens, when you feel that void in your life and you don't feel like anyone cares about you, you're vulnerable, right?
Yes.
To men in particular, if you're a woman, or vice versa, a man,
Yes.
if the other way. But you were vulnerable to men who weren't necessarily good to you either.
Yes, I guess you're looking for anyone who will give you attention. Anyone who would, spend time, who would listen to me and just spend time with me and should give me that time that no one else ever gave me, and just show me attention. And I always felt that, for showing love was maybe it was physical, and I wouldn't really take the time to get to know the person and see really, I didn't grow up in church. So I wasn't waiting, praying to God, asking God, send me the right man. And no, it wasn't like that. I existed. I wasn't really feel like right or wrong, or I was just doing what everybody else did.
And it got to the point where one of the men in your life tried to actually take your life.
Oh, yes. Oh, he made it clear. If I can't have you, nobody else will. Nobody else will. I had to get restraining orders. I feared for my life. Came to a place where I didn't want to live anymore. And I was so fearful and broken, because it would just bring me down and my self-esteem was low. For me, I was worthless. If you're not if I can't have you, nobody else will. You're no good. You're always bringing you down. And then you realize, wait a minute, maybe, why am I here? And maybe I have no purpose and nobody's gonna love me. I felt like, no one loved me. My father wasn't there. My mom, she lived her life.
Your grandma left.
Grandma
by
left.
choice.
And yeah.
So you didn't grow up in church, but you still had a faith in God. So tell me about that.
Actually, no, I didn't grow up in church, but I met when I was 19 when I spoke to my dad for the first time. He wrote me a letter, and imagine, for 19 years I had never spoken to him, never saw him, but he was strongly involved in the church. And he started giving me psalms. In his letters, he would write down psalms for me to read. And he would say, pray these psalms every morning before sunrise and light a white candle. And that's what I was doing. And I did that for 3 years.
So you were kind of starting this relationship with God, so broken. How did he come? Because you saw him as a very distant father to someone that you personally became involved with. How does that happen, and what does that mean?
Okay, and it's because of my father, my biological father, that I even got a Bible, and I started reading the Psalms. And I was just reading the Psalms because I was fearful. I was afraid. I have an ex who's trying to kill me. I was just out of fear. And when I started reading like Psalm 35 and say, you know, like God would just promises to protect me and to take care of my enemies. And at that time, I wasn't saved. I didn't know God. I just wanted revenge. I wanted revenge from whoever hurt me. And just reading that, God was saying, He will deliver me from my enemies. He's a God of vengeance. And I didn't know Jesus. I didn't know anything about the church. I was just praying this Father God. I know there's a Father God. So that's what I was praying, reading the Psalm. So I did that for 3 years. 3 years I was reading the Psalms faithfully, the same Psalms that my biological father gave me, and I would read them every day. I would pray the Psalms. And then one day, in the year of 2000, I was watching Dr. Charles Stanley on In Touch. And he said, if you want to accept Jesus Christ into your life. So I prayed the prayer. I prayed the sinner's prayer, how to accept Jesus into my life. However, I was still depressed, still unforgiving. I had no victory in my life. I had suicidal thoughts. Yes, I was saved, but there was no victory. I had no victory in my life. But then a few months later, my mother's friend's pastor called me. And she didn't know me. She said these words. She says, you have to forgive. Oh,
Okay, I want to hold it right there because we need to take a break. And this is a great place to break, don't you think? If some stranger calls you up and says you have to forgive, we're going to find out what happens next in just a moment.